What's the first name that pops into your head when you hear the word doubt? If you're like the other 7 billion of us, it's Thomas, doubting Thomas. How would you like to go down in history as the one person whose name is associated with doubt? Not Thomas the valiant or Thomas the wise or even Thomas the loyal disciple, but Thomas the doubter. What a loser. For an apostle, for a believer, it doesn't get much worse. But take a closer look. The Gospels don't present Thomas as a loser at all, quite the opposite. He's not there when Jesus first appears to the other disciples, so when they run and tell him that Jesus has risen from the dead, Thomas says, I will not believe it unless I see it for myself, unless I can take my finger and put it in the nail print in his wrist and the wound in his side. Actually, what Thomas says in the original translation, literally, is unless I can take my fist and thrust it up his side, I refuse to believe. It's a graphic and grotesque image and a tremendously bold challenge. He's saying to Jesus, if you're really alive, show me, prove it. And remarkably, he does. Thomas's challenge isn't met with a deafening silence or a rebuke from God or even a lightning bolt to the head. Thomas's challenge is met with Jesus showing up, revealing himself to Thomas, telling him even, go ahead, Thomas, take your fist and thrust it up my side, if that's what you need to believe. Then Thomas says something equally remarkable. He says to Jesus, my Lord and my God. That's the most profound confession of faith in all the Gospels. No other human being gets who Jesus is like Thomas, and it's his doubt that gets him there. Whatever you think of the resurrection, whether you believe it happened or not, this story, the story of Thomas, is paradigmatic for Christian faith. As a result of his doubting, Thomas is led to a deeper faith, to true faith. Christianity, therefore, isn't afraid of the questions, of the questioning, because it trusts that the evidence for faith, for Christian faith, is solid enough that any doubting Thomases who pursue it will eventually come to faith. Or as another Thomas Merton said, Thomas Merton was a monk who dedicated his life to Christ and was considered by many to be the greatest Catholic spiritual writer of the 20th century. Merton said this. He said, you cannot be a person of faith unless you know how to doubt. See, doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Doubt can lead you to true faith. But not all doubt does this. In previous generations, doubt was taboo. It was thought to be arrogantly irreverent to raise doubts, to question God. Who are we to question God? And often doubt was repressed. In our day and age, it's the exact opposite. Doubt has become fashionable. It's kind of cool to question God. It seems sophisticated and intelligent to be a skeptical person when it comes to God. The pendulum has completely swung the other way. And as a skeptic, I welcome that. But not all doubt is honest and sincere. Not all doubt is open to the evidence, to the best evidence. I had a friend a number of years ago, who didn't believe. One night I was at his house watching TV when the evening news came on. And as is often the case, the lead story was some kind of horrible tragedy. When that news story was over, he turned to me and he said, see, Ed, he called me Ed, see, Ed, that's why I can't believe. How could any God allow such senseless suffering? For years, I have been looking for an opportunity to share my faith with him, so I thought, this is it, this is my moment. And what a moment it was, because the question he was asking was the very question that launched me on my doubting quest for truth and ultimately, eventually, led me to faith. So I launched into my brilliant explanation. But when I was done, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders as if to say, meh. And then he quickly changed the subject. He was completely unconvinced. But that doesn't mean there isn't a good answer to his question. There is. He really wasn't looking for the answer in the first place. His doubt was really an excuse, a reason to keep God at arm's length. How do I know that? How can I be so sure? Because a few years later, he came to faith. And resolving that question didn't matter anymore. It wasn't important because that wasn't the issue in the first place. The issue for him in the first place was that he really didn't want God to be part of his life. C.S. Lewis called that willful blindness. Lewis came to faith through an intellectual, academic process. He was an atheist for many years and then came to faith because he found the evidence so compelling. But he admits that part of his reluctance to come to faith had to do with that willful blindness. I'm not saying that everybody who doesn't believe is willfully blind. There are many people who are sincerely seeking, who are genuine about it, and they just haven't yet found the evidence. But what I am saying is that no amount of evidence, even the best evidence, can't convince somebody who is unwilling to believe. It won't supersede the will. And in our skeptical culture, it's easy to deceive ourselves, to think that we're being somehow sophisticated and skeptical, considering all the questions, when in fact all we're doing is using our doubts as an excuse, as a way to keep God at arm's length. But if you know how to doubt, if you are an open-hearted seeker, then Christianity promises that God will reveal himself to you. That's why Thomas, doubting Thomas, is my hero, because doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Faith, genuine, compelling, profound Christian faith, always welcomes honest questions and honest challenges, because there is more than enough evidence for the person who is sincerely seeking God to see for themselves and believe too.